Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the webinar this evening. It's really great to have so many people online, and it's really good to welcome both David and Scott here tonight, or this morning in many cases. If Scott and David, if you guys would just like to say hi and exactly where you are at the moment.
Hello, everybody, and welcome. It is always a pleasure for me to join these nice conversations with Scott and with Kevin's help. Last time I was in the Cayman Islands when we spoke, and my background was much more exciting than this wall here. This time I'm in Palo Alto, California, at the heart of Silicon Valley, where I will be speaking, keynoting the D10E conference on decentralization 15 minutes after our webinar ends. And I will be talking about the value of blockchain and how, at the time the first internet boom was happening 20 years ago, it created trillions of dollars of value and paved the way for the next 20 years of economic growth, even though it was just a local Silicon Valley centered phenomenon. So imagine what blockchain can do today, given how global it is. It will revolutionize and change the world. And that is also a bit of what we are going to talk about today.
Yeah, great. And yourself, Scott?
So I'm sitting here in Johannesburg. I'm at an event with the Entrepreneurs Institute. So it's entrepreneurs from all over the world that have got together, and it's been quite exciting. We've been putting together what is called a micro degree so that we can really scale and share the information of how people, we basically created the 8 steps on how to create wealth through real estate. And yep, so that's the reason I'm in Joburg at the moment, also in a hotel room.
Great, that's so good to see. I just wanted to confirm, everybody who's online, that you can see the screen, so it should be the title saying webinar with David's picture. Just if everyone can confirm with me that that's what we're seeing.
Yep.
Great, that's so great. So before we get going tonight with David, I just wanted to once again remind everyone that we really enjoy our webinars to be interactive. So please, there's a questions box. So please do put your comments in there. Thank you, Pierre, for letting me know that you can see the screen. So put your questions in there so that we can answer those at the end of the webinar. And like I did last week, I just want to share who's on the webinar tonight, and are you similar or dissimilar to everybody? So tonight, we're going to be talking about blockchain as well as Internet of Things. And so we asked the question around the Internet of Things when people signed up. And once again, you can see that the majority of people are still novices in the blockchain space, have potentially not partaken in a token sale yet. And it was very interesting to see that most of the people, more than 50% of the people tonight, know what Internet of Things is or have heard about it, but a very small percentage can say that, yes, I could develop on it. And then just the world map just showing you where all our participants are from tonight. And it's really exciting that we have such a global audience. And before we get into David, I just wanted to remind everyone that there are future webinars that are coming up on the 7th and the 14th of March, and I will be putting a link to those in the chat box, so please look out for those. And then we will also have some live events in Puerto Rico. Both Scott and David will be speaking in Puerto Rico, and then David will be coming out to South Africa. I'm in Cape Town at the moment, so it's really exciting that David will be coming out here. So without further ado, we will be going over to David, who's going to share his screen and is going to be giving a presentation before we go into the question and answer section tonight. So David, I have given you presenter rights, so over to you.
Thank you very much. And I will manage it differently over here. What you can do probably, as you see, what I'm gonna do right now is to maximize my window for our viewers because I am doing these kinds of tricks, right? I'm a techie, so I like that. And yes, for me, speaking at both conferences and these webinars is always a pleasure. I do like to have people connect with me. So I like to continue the conversations, and if the people attending the webinar today want to send questions after we finish, it will be wonderful to be able to answer them as well.
Could I make a suggestion, David? You've got your Twitter handle there, etc. But also, people do have questions. We actively are communicating on the Telegram group, where we can keep that conversation going as well.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I'm sure you will be able to share that URL with them later on. Yep, everything 100%. That we see around us is based on the exponential growth of technology. When you see numbers very humbly growing from 0.06, 0.12, 0.25, well, you would think they won't amount to much. And actually, often a linear view of the world not only is as good as the exponential one at the beginning, but it could lead to better budgets, better resources, better promotions, except that when a given threshold is surpassed, and these numbers go from 1 to 2 to 4 to 8, they really become overwhelming. And in a very noisy environment, of course, it is not easy to distinguish between what are things that you can ignore and what is the trend that you really have to keep an eye on. But when the disruptive power of exponentials really kicks in, that is when the linear interpolation doesn't hold anymore. Now, when we are looking at technologies, and I showed you the progression from personal computers to phones to smartphones and the Internet of Things, which we'll be covering today, it is important to realize that we are not talking about just a single technology, but the series of technologies that succeed one another. That is what we are looking at. That is what we are concentrating on. And the power of this is incredible. Technology is really democratizing the world and putting the power of technology in the hands of everybody. Admittedly, sometimes it arrives later than one would think. This is a picture of the picture phone presented by Bell Labs in 1964. And what today you would call Skype or Facebook Messenger or whatever else we use to communicate on video with each other came, well, something like 50 plus years later, even though this product was commercially available in the 1960s. But this relentless coevolution of humanity with technology is what really enabled us to move from an era when only one guy could decide what to do. He was the pharaoh, and he said, let's build a pyramid. Through the Middle Ages to our industrial age, and today, where the global infrastructure of communication is really enabling millions and billions of people to be proactive, to design their life, to take things in their hands, to understand the world better and better. And this kind of fine-grained understanding of the world is very important. We have to develop very resilient strategies to understand what works, what creates societies that can adapt to the changes, that themselves can be resilient as these changes disrupt the existing status quo. Computers were 50, 60 years ago, these hulking electronic brains, and exponential change turned them into ever more performing and compact and amazing tools. We are now reaching quantum scales of totally new phenomena that we are harnessing in order to be able to understand the world and act on the world ever better. The same with software, where when you turned off the computer at the end of the day, they would forget everything. And then they became a little more interactive, even though they still needed specialists to use them. But then they become easier and easier to use, colorful and aesthetically pleasing to us, liberating themselves from the dimensions of our hands as they abandoned the keyboards for us interacting with them. Started to understand our gestures, our movements, our words, and we are even moving in an era where computers can decode and analyze our thoughts, and we can command computers with our thoughts. This is both necessary and tremendously useful, because this is what makes computers disappear into the environment. And this creates incredible changes, not only from the point of view of how we work with them, but how the economic organizations that we have around us are shaped. One of the reasons why networks are replacing traditional bureaucratic hierarchies, as Fred Wilson, a leading venture capitalist in New York, says, is because of this technological change. And the Internet of Things is being born out of this evolution. The network of networks that we call Internet is very naturally transforming through these smart objects. I've been talking about these themes with companies like Cisco for many, many years. And it is fun to see that what has been really only on the drawing boards some time ago now is becoming a reality. If we think about electric cars and the supposed range anxiety that they induce when you don't know where you need to stop, and well, if you will find a recharging station on your trip, well, we already have solutions. What you see here on the screen is a self-driving vacuum cleaner that has no range anxiety. It can be in a home as big as you want. It will home onto the recharging station by itself, remembering where it is, and follow what it needs to do in order to do its job. And self-driving cars are an excellent example of the power of the Internet of Things. They are computers, actually supercomputers on wheels, and their entire design is changing. Cars are going to resemble nothing like the vehicles we have today, just like horseless carriages are not carriages without a horse. We call them automobiles, and they became something very different. Apart from this incredible example of the application of the Internet of Things, self-driving cars that are starting to work. Any electronic store, or Apple store you go and visit today will be chock full of Internet of Things devices, whether your smart thermostat or others. And this kind of granularity that we describe the world with is what is driving the adoption of new protocols that are naturally decentralized, like the IPv6 protocol, that is going to be able to keep up with the growth of this network of networks. That is necessarily autonomous because we are only a few billion people. Already we have more mobile phones than humans, and there will be thousands and tens of thousands of IoT devices per person on the planet. And as a consequence, just like we hate it when we have to obey our phone as it wants our attention for every little thing and we turn notifications down, similarly, we are building machines that are able to take decisions for the data without human intervention. This is, for example, the nature of the Large Hadron Collider in Geneva, which is one of the most complex and expensive machines ever built at 25 billion euro, and it automatically and by itself analyzes and discards 99.99% of the data that so expensively it collects, because it very well knows that no human has the time or the willingness of taking any look at that data, and only those particle collisions are shared with the scientists that have the promise of being really meaningful. And as we used the web originally for collecting data, and that gave us access to knowledge, as exemplified by Wikipedia. And as we built the Web 2.0 platforms, now most triumphantly represented by Facebook, that enabled applications to give access to our social graph, to our human connections, we will be now with IoT and the blockchain describe the entire world and its dynamic processes with the sensors that we are laying down everywhere. The networks that we will need for this to happen require tremendous bandwidth. And luckily, in an interlocking coevolution of various technologies, these networks are being now completed, and they are ready to be deployed on a global basis. The stack of applications from the physical layer to the network layer is reflected in the value of what we are doing. The value that can be tremendously complex to implement, but can be extremely easy to access. 10 years ago, when I started talking about the Internet of Things or more, I would tell people, listen, the Internet of Things will turn everything into an internet connected object. And they would tell me that I'm crazy. But Scott, you are in a hotel, and very likely the room to your hotel is not opened with a metal key. It is opened very likely with a key card that has been programmed, and the key card talks to the door talks to the server checks whether you can enter the room, and only then the door is opened. Just like I predicted, doors are now internet connected. And it is definitely the case that, as my friend Lee says, every object is going to be smart, just like our hotel doors, to the right degree in the future. Being able to leverage this data is essential. How we own the data, because the Internet of Things that has also perils. There is an excellent book called Future Crimes that talks about how various technologies can be exploited. And with the Internet of Things, it already happened. A couple of years ago, the electric grid of the Ukraine was brought down in a coordinated three-pronged attack. We have on a regular basis alerts of systems that should work well and should help us, but when Chinese webcams are sold by the millions and their admin password is hard-coded into the webcam and it leaks on the internet, that creates uncomfortable situations that we have to be able to prevent. How humans interact in a world enabled by the Internet of Things is certainly tricky. There are a lot of conversations about the extreme degree of optimization in the Amazon warehouses, where people are told where to go and what to do by their smart wearable computers. There are even now warehouses in the UK built by Tesco, one of the leading retail chains, that are dark and cold. And they are dark and cold because they are not built for humans. They are built for robots that perform 24/7 at a degree of precision that is unreachable by us. But humans and robots, nodes of the Internet of Things, can and must collaborate. One of the emerging area, very exciting developments in robotics today is exactly called that. They are called cobots. You can see one here, which has this screen with very nice and visible representations of eyes. Now, those eyes don't see, and they don't need to see. The robot's sensors are all over, but those eyes are there in order for the human operator working together with the robot to have a sense of where the robot is going to move its hands next. To know, following the sight of the robot, as it were, on the screen, that maybe he or she has to move out of the way in order not to be hurt or not to collide, at least with the robot. And this is a very subtle, but I think important hint of how today and in the future, humans and nodes of the Internet of Things, ever more intelligent devices, need to understand each other, need to collaborate, and need to augment each other's options. Now, of course, these interactions are not always completely predictable. When a television announcer enthusiastically spoke about the possibility of placing orders with the smart speaker made by Amazon called Alexa that understands your voice, and the announcer said, well, yes, and I could just say, Alexa, order a 6-pack of beer, I think, rather than Coca-Cola. Millions of smart speakers in the homes of those people who were following that particular program ordered 6 packs of beer. Now, since then, Amazon updated the Alexa device so that it more specifically recognizes and obeys the voice of the trained owner only, rather than anybody. It was a fun and luckily not too disruptive example of the challenges we have had. Everybody recognizes that the way that a healthy Internet of Things can be built, that respects privacy, that respects the ownership of data, that is resilient, must be decentralized. And it doesn't matter whether you are a startup, you are an enterprise, you're a large corporation in technology. These trends, together with what we have been talking about a lot in these webinars of the promise of blockchain, must be done rapidly but responsibly. We will be able to harness the benefits of these technologies. I do believe, and that is the belief of many that I work with, that technology is a positive sum game. We are able to achieve progress in our civilization thanks to technology, and any challenge we have in the future will be solved thanks to more technology, more smarts, more people participating actively in society, and that is, I firmly believe, the way to go. So these were some opening remarks that I prepared for our conversation to then proceed, and I hope that you enjoyed it, and it was a good way to start our interactions.